Many of you may have been seeing headlines around the rising cost of fossil fuels. Has the last 2 years with the pandemic and more recently Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed your views around how we see the green energy transition happening around the world?
I think what we see at the moment as a result of the situation in Ukraine and some other macro factors is a strengthening of the long-term imperative for the energy transition, making it very clear that that energy transition needs to take place, and it needs to take place as quickly as possible. But we are also seeing a toughening of the near-term environment with rising costs, with interest rates, etc. And if we're not careful, we may find ourselves stumbling a bit in the near term and not doing as much as we should. I think it's very important then that we maintain our focus on that long-term imperative. And there's one of the things that has really come through as a result of the situation in Ukraine is that the reliance on imported fuel has been too high in too many developed economies, and they're really suffering for that now. And the impact that can have on the economy and the volatility in the pricing in the market caused by that is probably now too high a cost to bear. And I think that's probably a message that we in renewable energy have been giving for years, but not listened to. And people are listening now because they're really feeling it. Now, there will be a tendency in the near term to try to replace Russian gas with other sources. And I can understand why that may have to happen. But I think that has to be done in a manner where we don't commit to long-term extraction. We don't make decisions for the long term solving a short-term problem. The other thing, of course, that we hear a lot more of recently is talking about nuclear. And again, I think nuclear could very well have a role in the energy mix. But in my opinion, nuclear is a solution for our children, maybe a problem for our grandchildren, but a solution for our children. The only solution we have today is really to go as hard and as fast as you can on renewable energy, because there's good examples from other markets where a privatized process, which was really designed to bring private capital in at the lowest possible price, has worked, and it's brought a lot of investment in and maybe reduced the cost and kept the efficiency quite strong. But actually what's happened a lot of times in those markets is once the market gets to a certain size, that model starts to fail, because you end up either with too much risk in the hands of the private investors or not enough strategic planning. And I think if you're in a country where this becomes a national priority and you want to go big, you have to have a strategically planned network with a lot of anticipatory investment. So what I mean is you want a network which is designed offshore, interconnected offshore, which makes it cheaper to build. It makes it more resilient with better redundancy. It allows you to come onshore at lesser points, which means less environmental impact, less community issues, okay? And you can build it before the projects actually need it, and it stops being the bottleneck. Now, read into this what you will, but in my opinion, privatized solutions are rarely strategic enough in their thought. They tend to be about de-risked, near-term opportunities, bringing in cheap capital. Actually, what you want, I think, is a national program. That's the way to produce a nationally, strategically planned grid system. And then later on, bits of it can be privatized, bits of it can be sold off. But in the outset, I would make that a national strategic plan. So firstly, the technology is pretty much there, right? I mean, the turbine technology isn't changing that much. The floating concepts are being developed. Really, what's going to define the pace is the infrastructure, the logistics. Because it's actually now when you start looking at planning a real project, you start to realize just how massive these structures are and how consumptive they are in terms of yard space and engineering capacity. And that's where most markets, including, sorry to say, the United States, are going to take a long time to get to where they need to get to. So I think that the pace of floating will be defined by infrastructure and logistics, not by technology. And it takes a lot of investment. And luckily, here, that investment's been made, and you've already got it right. And that's why I think we're going to see the pace here quicker than anywhere else, as long as the level of government support and the regulatory framework continues to stay high.